Ladies and gentlemen, today we dive not into a motivational pep talk, but into a psychological excavation. Much like Carl Jung, the father of analytical psychology, believed the soul of man is not merely to be fixed or trained, but understood. If you've ever found yourself numb to life's pleasures, emotionally flat, or wondering, why don't I feel excited anymore? This is not a trivial mood. It is a profound signal from the psyche. We shall explore 6 deep psychological and biological mechanisms that explain this emotional void. Our goal is not just to understand the symptoms, but to equip you with the awareness to begin restoring emotional vitality. One of the most foundational reasons people stop feeling excitement is that they've become disconnected from their true self. This is not a surface-level issue of simply being out of touch with hobbies or past interests. It's a profound psychological misalignment between one's inner values and one's outer life. Carl Jung often described the self as a totality that includes both conscious awareness and unconscious potential. When the life we live does not honor both, we experience an inner deadness, a quiet erosion of vitality that eventually manifests as apathy, boredom, or emotional flatness. Modern society reinforces this disconnection in subtle and systemic ways. From a young age, we are conditioned to prioritize external achievement over internal alignment. We are taught what to pursue: status, success, security, without being taught how to reflect on what truly matters to us. Over time, we begin to operate based on external scripts rather than internal values. We go to school, get a job, maintain relationships, and follow life's checklist. But somewhere along the way, the original spark, the inner compass, gets lost. The result is that even when life looks successful on the outside, it feels empty on the inside. When you feel disconnected from yourself, your emotions become blunted. Excitement, in its truest form, arises from resonance, when something in the outer world reflects or supports your inner truth. But if your daily activities, relationships, or goals are not aligned with who you are at a core level, there will be no resonance, no spark. It's not that you're incapable of feeling joy, it's that your psyche no longer finds the environment meaningful enough to produce it. There is also a protective element to this disconnection. Sometimes, when a person repeatedly compromises their authenticity, perhaps by staying in an unfulfilling career or suppressing core desires, the psyche starts to numb itself as a defense mechanism. This emotional shutdown is not a failure, but a signal. Your inner self is retreating because it is not being heard. It is saying, until you start living truthfully, I will not offer you the gift of aliveness. Reconnecting with the self involves slowing down and beginning to ask difficult but necessary questions. What do I really want? Not what I've been told to want. What matters to me? When do I feel most alive? The process is not always comfortable, because it may bring up conflict between the life you are living and the one you truly desire. But this tension is necessary. Jung referred to this kind of tension as the creative conflict that precedes integration and growth. The discomfort of self-exploration is often the price of reclaiming your passion. Another layer to this disconnection is the neglect of symbolic or soulful life. Jung believed that myth, symbol, and dream were essential components of the psyche. Without ritual, reflection, or deep personal meaning, the soul atrophies. Many people who feel emotionally numb are not clinically depressed. They are spiritually malnourished. They are not engaging with the world in a way that feeds the deeper layers of the psyche. Excitement doesn't return through distraction or stimulation. It returns through integration, the process of bringing the outer life into harmony with the inner self. In short, when you are disconnected from yourself, your psyche withholds its energy. This is not a flaw, it is a function. It is a sign that something essential is missing or ignored. Only by returning inward, by rediscovering and realigning with your authentic identity, can you begin to feel deeply again. Excitement is not something you chase, it is something that naturally arises when you are fully yourself. A powerful and often overlooked reason for the absence of excitement in modern life is chronic overstimulation. In a world that bombards us with endless inputs, notifications, advertisements, video clips, breaking news, and algorithmically designed content, the brain is in a constant state of sensory engagement. While this may initially feel like excitement, it is in fact an artificial intensity, one that eventually leads to emotional dullness and a diminished capacity to feel joy or motivation in everyday life. At the center of this issue lies the brain's reward system, specifically the neurotransmitter dopamine, which plays a central role in motivation, pleasure, and reinforcement learning. Dopamine isn't the pleasure chemical, as it's often oversimplified. It's more accurately described as the chemical of anticipation. When you anticipate a reward, dopamine spikes. Each time you scroll social media and encounter something novel, a funny video, a shocking headline, a provocative post, your brain gets a quick hit. These bursts of stimulation train your nervous system to seek more novelty, more engagement, more feedback. But the key problem is that this system was not designed to handle such a rapid, repeated flood of stimuli. Over time, what once excited you becomes baseline. This is known as dopamine adaptation, or more formally, the hedonic treadmill.
The brain adjusts to high levels of stimulation by becoming less sensitive to it. Activities that once brought genuine joy, reading a book, walking outdoors, having a slow meal with a friend, may now seem boring or unsatisfying. The brain has been conditioned to expect intensity, variety, and instant gratification, making real-life experiences feel underwhelming in comparison. The paradox here is that the more we stimulate ourselves in search of excitement, the less we actually feel it. In the short term, high-stimulation environments appear to offer relief from boredom or emotional flatness, but in the long term, they blunt our emotional range. People begin to describe themselves as feeling numb, unmotivated, or emotionally grey. These are not just moods, they are neurobiological outcomes of overstimulation and reward system fatigue. This phenomenon also affects our ability to sustain attention and presence, two essential ingredients for feeling excitement and engagement. When the brain becomes addicted to quick shifts in focus, it struggles to settle into slower, more immersive activities. But real excitement, meaningful excitement, often requires immersion. It arises when we lose ourselves in a moment, in a project, or in a conversation. Chronic overstimulation steals this capacity from us by keeping the brain in a constant loop of seeking and distraction. Another consequence is the elevation of our internal noise. With so much input entering the mind, the space needed for self-reflection, emotional processing, and creative thought becomes crowded out. Instead of listening to our inner signals, our intuition, our interests, our deeper needs, we become reactive to external stimuli. This not only disturbs our mental clarity, but it also distances us from the quieter joys of life, which require calm and openness to emerge. The good news is that the brain is plastic. It can change. Reducing overstimulation doesn't mean abandoning technology or becoming a hermit. It means becoming more intentional. When we begin to practice digital hygiene, limiting social media, setting boundaries around screens, embracing silence, we allow the nervous system to recalibrate. Slowly the brain begins to respond again to natural sources of pleasure, a walk, a conversation, a task completed with care. These moments, once dulled by overexposure, begin to glow again. In essence, the absence of excitement in your life may not be a sign that something is wrong with you. It may be a sign that your environment is overwhelming your capacity to feel. The answer is not to seek more stimulation, but to create the space where excitement can arise on its own, naturally, quietly, and with depth. A subtle but powerful reason why many people no longer feel excited is the long-term suppression of emotions, both positive and negative, and the avoidance of what Carl Jung famously called the shadow. The shadow represents the parts of ourselves we reject, repress, or deny: anger, envy, shame, fear, desire, even potential. It is composed of everything the conscious ego refuses to identify with, but which nonetheless lives within us. The more we suppress this hidden side, the more emotionally flat and disconnected we become. This emotional suppression gradually erodes our ability to feel anything with intensity, including excitement. Emotions, even the uncomfortable ones, serve a psychological purpose. They are signals that help us navigate reality, express needs, process change, and grow into more integrated versions of ourselves. When we suppress emotion especially consistently, we don't just bury pain, we also mute our access to joy, curiosity, anticipation, and creativity. Emotional suppression is not selective. You can't numb sadness without numbing happiness. You can't bottle rage without also dampening passion. The whole emotional spectrum becomes less vivid. Many of us were raised in environments where expressing certain emotions was discouraged or punished. Perhaps anger was seen as dangerous, sadness as weakness, or ambition as arrogance. Over time, we learn to exile these parts of ourselves in order to maintain social acceptance or personal safety. But the cost is internal fragmentation. We become split within, showing the world only a limited version of who we are, while hiding vast unexpressed energies beneath the surface. This hidden material does not disappear. It lives in the unconscious and continues to influence our thoughts, behaviors, and emotional states. Jung warned that whatever is not made conscious will be lived out as fate. A person may not understand why they feel unmotivated, uninspired, or emotionally drained, but often, it is because a huge portion of their emotional life is locked away, unexpressed and unresolved. The psyche pays a heavy toll for this internal censorship. Excitement, as an emotion, requires a sense of openness. It requires that the emotional system be alive, fluid, and responsive. But if a person has been in the habit of bracing against their own feelings, they also brace against excitement. This can be subtle. Someone may say, "I just don't get excited like I used to," without realizing that over the years they've become experts at controlling their own emotional vulnerability. This control may have once served them, perhaps to survive trauma or hardship, but in time, it becomes a prison. Shadow work is the process of acknowledging and reintegrating the rejected aspects of the self. This doesn't mean acting out harmful impulses, but rather recognizing them, listening to them, and understanding the unmet needs they represent. When we begin to make space for our full range of feelings, when we allow ourselves to feel anger without judgment, or sadness without shame, we also reopen the pathways through which excitement flows. Many breakthroughs in therapy and personal growth occur not when someone learns a new strategy, but when they feel something they had long avoided. A buried grief, once expressed, often brings surprising relief. A repressed ambition, once accepted, can become a source of renewed motivation. These emotional releases reawaken the nervous system. They create room for new energy, emotional energy to return, and with it excitement begins to flicker back. Ultimately, suppressed emotions don't vanish, they only retreat into silence, where they sap our vitality in more covert ways. The return of excitement requires more than external change, it requires inner reconciliation. When we turn toward the shadow, we do not become darker, we become whole. And from wholeness comes emotional aliveness. We begin to feel again, not just pain or fear, but also the rich, energizing thrill of being fully human. A significant reason many people stop feeling excited about life is that they are living in what Viktor Frankl, the Austrian psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, described as an existential vacuum. This is not simply about being bored or unmotivated. It's a deeper psychological and spiritual state in which a person lacks a clear sense of meaning or purpose. When there is no compelling why, the emotional system begins to shut down. Excitement, in its most enduring form, is not generated by comfort or even achievement. It arises from meaning. When meaning is absent, emotional flatness often takes its place. In a world that often emphasizes doing over being, productivity over purpose, and appearance over essence, it's easy to drift into this vacuum without even noticing. Many people construct their lives around what they are supposed to do, choosing careers, relationships, and routines based on cultural expectations rather than personal conviction. At first, this may create the illusion of progress or satisfaction, but over time the psyche begins to rebel. If one's external life is not grounded in an authentic inner vision, then even success feels hollow. This hollowness is not a flaw, it is a message. The human mind is meaning-seeking by nature. We are not just biological machines reacting to stimuli, we are psychological and existential beings who need to feel that our actions contribute to something larger, deeper, or more enduring than momentary pleasure. Without that anchor, life becomes a series of tasks, goals, and distractions. The emotional result of this can look like low motivation, indifference, or restlessness, but at its core, it is often a crisis of meaning. The individual no longer feels connected to a reason for being. This vacuum can be intensified by modern life's relentless pace and surface-level engagement. Social media, consumerism, and entertainment culture often encourage us to live outwardly, focusing on how things look rather than how they feel. When life becomes performative rather than purposeful, the soul slowly begins to retreat. You might be busy every day, yet feel like nothing truly matters. That sense of quiet despair, of going through the motions, is the signature of the existential vacuum. Interestingly, this kind of numbness isn't always triggered by hardship. Sometimes it emerges in the aftermath of success. A person may reach a goal they've worked toward for years, graduating, landing a dream job, achieving financial stability, and suddenly feel nothing. The target was hit, but the deeper purpose was never truly examined. This moment of emotional disorientation is not a failure, it's an invitation. It signals the need to reevaluate life through the lens of meaning rather than outcome. Reclaiming excitement from this vacuum requires an inward turn. Not a turn toward immediate fixes or artificial passions, but toward deep questions. What do I care about that isn't tied to achievement? What gives me a sense of belonging or contribution? Where does my inner voice lead when I quiet all the external noise? These are not questions with fast answers, but they are essential ones. The journey to meaning is not linear, but it is always enlivening. Even the search itself, the honest questioning, can begin to stir the emotional life again. Frankl believed that meaning can be found in three primary ways: through work, doing something significant; through love, caring deeply for another; and through suffering, finding purpose in difficult experiences. Any of these paths can restore the psychological ground needed for excitement to return, not the fleeting high of novelty, but the grounded energy that comes from knowing your life has direction and value. Ultimately, the existential vacuum is not a permanent state, it is a transitional one. It appears when we've outgrown a previous version of meaning, but have not yet constructed a new one. Rather than avoiding it, we are meant to pass through it with courage. On the other side is not just the return of excitement, but the emergence of a more honest and meaningful self. Another major reason why many people no longer feel excited about work, relationships, or even life itself is due to a state of burnout and nervous system fatigue. In psychological and neurological terms, burnout is more than just being tired. It is a prolonged condition of emotional, physical, and cognitive exhaustion caused by sustained stress and overexertion. In this state, the body's stress response system, the sympathetic nervous system, becomes chronically activated, while the parasympathetic system, which promotes rest and recovery, remains suppressed. Over time, this imbalance doesn't just affect energy levels, it erodes our capacity to feel joy, creativity, and engagement. Burnout is often mistakenly attributed only to overwork or career demands, but it can arise in any area of life where there's a persistent gap between effort and reward, responsibility and recognition, giving and receiving, parenting, caregiving, academic pressure, emotional labor,
labor in relationships, all can lead to the same result, a nervous system that is depleted and unable to regulate properly. When this happens, even activities that once brought excitement, planning a trip, starting a new project, connecting socially, begin to feel like chores. This isn't laziness or a lack of motivation. It's a physiological signal that the body and mind are in need of repair. The human nervous system is designed to move between states of activation and recovery. You experience stress, rise to meet a challenge, and then return to rest and restoration. This is a healthy cycle. But modern life often interrupts this rhythm. Many people live in near constant states of low-level anxiety, busyness, and mental overdrive, without sufficient downtime. Technology adds to the pressure, creating a situation where we are always accessible, always stimulated, always on. This creates a cumulative overload, not just of work, but of attention, emotion, and decision-making, which wears down the nervous system. One of the first casualties of this chronic stress is emotional vitality. Excitement, like all emotions, arises when the nervous system is regulated and flexible. When the system is burnt out, emotions begin to flatten. You may still function, go through daily tasks, or meet obligations, but you feel disconnected from the deeper emotional resonance of your experiences. A kind of numbness sets in. You may say things like, "Nothing excites me anymore," or "I just feel blank," not realizing that this is your body's way of signaling that it has exceeded its sustainable limits. The tragedy of burnout is that it often goes unrecognized until it becomes severe. Many people blame themselves for their lack of excitement or productivity, believing they simply need to try harder or be more disciplined. But trying harder in a state of burnout only deepens the exhaustion. What's truly needed is rest. Genuine, intentional recovery. Not just sleep, but emotional rest, sensory rest, cognitive rest, and spiritual rest. This might mean setting boundaries, taking a sabbatical, unplugging from digital life, or even just slowing down to reflect on what your nervous system is telling you. Recovery from burnout is not a quick fix, but it is entirely possible. As the nervous system begins to stabilize, emotions start to return, a sense of curiosity emerges, joy becomes accessible again, excitement, once elusive, begins to flicker, but it doesn't happen because you pushed harder, it happens because you created the space for healing. When the nervous system is no longer in survival mode, it can afford to engage with life again, not just as a set of tasks to endure, but as a series of moments to feel and inhabit. In essence, when excitement disappears, it is not always a failure of motivation or desire. Often, it is the voice of the nervous system whispering that it is tired. Learning to listen to that voice, and responding with compassion and care, is the first step in reclaiming the emotional richness of life. In healing the body's stress response, we make space for vitality to return, not as a sudden rush, but as a quiet, steady renewal. A lesser discussed, yet deeply impactful reason why many people stop feeling excited is the gradual erosion of novelty and creative expression in their lives. Human beings are wired to seek stimulation, not in the shallow sense of constant distraction, but in the deeper psychological need for growth, variation, and self-expression. When life becomes overly predictable, repetitive, or rigid, the psyche begins to stagnate. Excitement withers not because life has become worse, but because it has become too familiar. The absence of novelty slowly dulls the emotional range, while the lack of creative outlets suffocates the soul's desire to contribute uniquely to the world. Novelty is more than mere entertainment. From a cognitive standpoint, it plays a crucial role in activating the brain's reward system. When we encounter something new, an idea, environment, challenge, or experience, our brain releases dopamine, not as a reward for pleasure, but as a motivator for exploration. This surge in dopamine promotes learning, curiosity, and engagement. But when our daily lives fall into monotonous routines, and we stop encountering new inputs, the brain has fewer reasons to engage with the present moment. Without newness, we begin to feel emotionally flat and mentally unstimulated. This doesn't mean one must constantly chase exotic experiences or dramatic life changes. In fact, the most effective forms of novelty are often subtle and meaningful. Learning a new skill, reading a thought-provoking book, visiting an unfamiliar place in your own town, or engaging in new conversations. What matters is the sense of movement and expansion, the feeling that life is evolving, that you are encountering the unknown, however small it may be. When novelty disappears, time begins to blur, and life becomes a series of repeated gestures. It's not that you're too tired to feel excitement, it's that your world has become too narrow to evoke it. Closely tied to this is the loss or suppression of creative expression. Creativity is not limited to the arts, it is the fundamental act of bringing something into existence that wasn't there before. Whether through writing, painting, problem-solving, designing, storytelling, gardening, or even building a new business, creative expression is how the self interacts with the world in a generative, playful, and meaningful way. When we don't have outlets for this expression, our emotional and psychological energy gets bottled up. We may start to feel disengaged, or even resentful without understanding why. Many adults, especially as they assume more responsibilities, gradually abandon their creative impulses. Creative play gets replaced by productivity, efficiency, and routine. Over time, the part of the self that once felt joy in making things, drawing, inventing, imagining, daydreaming, goes dormant, but it doesn't disappear. It simply waits, often showing its absence in the form of low motivation, inner frustration, or an unnameable longing. Without creativity, we lose a vital part of our humanity, and with that we lose the spark that makes life feel alive. The remedy is not to overhaul your life overnight, but to reintroduce variation and self-expression, however gently. Take a different route to work, journal about your dreams, try cooking something new without a recipe, join a workshop, make something, not because it's useful or profitable, but because it's yours. These small acts of exploration reawaken the sense of possibility, and with it, the quiet return of excitement. Ultimately, when life lacks novelty and creative expression, we don't just get bored, we start to forget what it feels like to be truly alive. Reigniting that feeling doesn't require waiting for inspiration, it requires creating the conditions where inspiration can arise. By inviting newness into our routines and finding spaces to express our inner world outwardly, we reconnect with the parts of ourselves that still long to be surprised, moved, and delighted. In doing so, we rediscover not only excitement, but a deeper and more enduring engagement with life itself. In the end, the question, why don't I feel excited anymore, is not a simple one, nor does it have a singular cause. As we've explored, the fading of excitement is not merely a mood or personality shift. It is often a complex signal arising from deeper psychological, emotional, and physiological imbalances. Whether it stems from chronic overstimulation, suppressed emotions, nervous system fatigue, existential emptiness, or the slow disappearance of novelty and creative expression, the absence of excitement reflects a disconnection, not just from life, but from the self. This speech has not sought to offer quick fixes or motivational platitudes. Instead, it invites a more honest and compassionate examination of your inner landscape. Perhaps the problem is not that you've become dull, lazy, or indifferent. Perhaps you are simply overwhelmed, burned out, creatively starved, or cut off from the parts of yourself that once felt free to explore, to feel, and to wonder. Excitement is not something you chase. It is something that arises naturally, when the conditions are right. It returns when the nervous system is calm, when meaning is rediscovered, when emotions are integrated rather than suppressed, when novelty enters a tired routine, and when the soul finds its voice through creation. In many cases, the return of excitement does not come in a grand moment. It begins quietly, with a small shift, a boundary respected, a truth spoken, a curiosity followed, a burden released. If you feel that spark is gone, know that it is not lost, it is buried, and the path forward is not about becoming someone new, but about reclaiming the parts of you that have been silenced or neglected. In doing so, excitement returns, not as noise or spectacle, but as a deep, sustaining sense that life is, once again, worth leaning into. The work then is not to force excitement, but to clear the way for it. That is the journey of healing, of reintegration, and of coming home to yourself.